All right, welcome back, y'all. This is going to be lecture 13 on Uruguay. You know what? I know a lot of these countries are can be, I don't know, they have worrying tales. Um, there's a little bit concerned about the future of Latin America and some of these places, Central Corridor, Venezuela, others. But Uruguay is like a happy story, right? So, yeah, let's get a happy one going on. They've been rolling for about 40 straight years of democracy that are sort of a shining star of the region. They're mostly rich, like they have one of the very highest GDP per capita in Latin America. And they have a really strong liberal democracy, not just the sort of trappings of democracy like elections and these sorts of things, but they have a very strong rule of law. They have very strong courts. They have really strong property rights. They have low crime. They have independent and co equal branches of government. They have peaceful leadership of turnover, which is great. And they're also like the most secular of any of the Latin American countries. It's a really small economy. It's a really small state. It was very basic in the early 20th century. It was kind of like Argentina. It was very based on ranching and not agriculture. They also implemented ISI, but this brought the same problems as we know of. They used to be very highly dependent on imported oil, and this caused really big problems in the late 70s when oil prices were problematic, or the mid 70s, excuse me, when oil prices were high. There were problems with supply. OPEC was sort of strong arming everyone, um, and so what they decided to do was expand the money supply, basically, and this caused real problems like inevitable inflation, like real high inflation. And they kept borrowing to continue their debt payments and their sort of bloated bureaucracy. Um, and it becomes problematic, as we'll talk about. I guess, one of their other sort of shining stars about this, one of the things that they really did well, just like sort of Japan and South Korea and others, was they instituted a lot of their sort of spending went to education really early. So that's had a really great payoff for them over time, just like it has in Japan, South Korea, and others. Uh, okay, so political organization in Uruguay is based around two parties. Today it's more like three, but historically it's been two. It's been the Colorados and the Blancos. Um, they basically they basically sort of had this very, we've talked about this cooperative participation. So they co-participate and it becomes a sort of institutionalized agreement, like we'll always guarantee spots for both of these parties. They have kind of an interesting party system. They're called lemas and then sub-lemas. So the lemas is like the umbrella party, right? But then they have like these mini parties inside the larger umbrella organization that are basically like sort of based on like a small group or an individual star politician, right? Who has his own sort of mini party inside the party, right? And so they'll total up all the mini party votes. Some people will get seats, then the party will take all this the additive of all of the sum of all those votes to determine its number of seats. It's a really weird system, but yeah, I should at least mention the sort of strange political makeup of their party organizations. They have really, really strong political organizations, uh, business associations, unions, a whole lot of like neighborhood organizations, these sorts of things. It looks a little bit like the United States in that sense, and less like some other sort of Latin American countries. Unfortunately, like in the late 60s and early 70s, as we saw those Marxist groups rise in other countries, you also see it happening in Uruguay. And this group called Tupamaros, which is a sort of anti state group, emerges. They start committing all these terrorist acts in Montevideo, which is the capital. The state basically starts to lose control, and the military slowly creeps in to the institutions and more and more and more power And by 1973, the military is ruling the state. Um, Unfortunately, they held a referendum in 1980 where they thought that they were going to win, and they lost bad. And so they begin negotiations to return to civilian rule, and civilian rule returns. I think it was like late 1984 they had elections. 1985 civilian rule returns and democracy returns, and democracy has been very strong and stable since, basically. Um, they have a centralized unitary government, right? So it's not like the United States where we have federalism. They just have like the law, and the legislature is the legislature. Like you don't have little regions with their own power, right? So it's a centralized unitary government. Um, they have a president who is was elected by plurality. In 1996, they changed this to a majority runoff system. So basically, like if you don't hit 51% in the first round, because there's usually more than two candidates, if you don't hit more than 51%, the top two vote getters will go to a second round, just like in like France, and we'll have a runoff where someone has to win, right? They also have a bicameral legislative system. They have an interesting district magnitude of one, right? So it's not like, again, say the United States, where every single, excuse me, they have a district magnitude of 99 because they have 99 members. So they have one district, and they use PR, and the top 99 vote getters get a seat. So yeah, really interesting. But they do have a really strong legislature, and they have a very strong committee system, just like in the U.S. Uh, about 20% of their economy comes from state-owned enterprises. So they have found oil. They also have, some smaller sort of extractive resources. They have a pretty huge welfare system for Latin America. And they also have a demographics problem, right? They have the most seniors in Latin America and the lowest birth rate. So there's not enough workers to sort of pay in the system like we're going to see in Japan, China, America, the UK, Germany, France, like everywhere, right? This is called the demographic cliff that's coming. And so Uruguay is having to face it early, and they have kind of a bloated social security system. They're wondering, are we going to have to reduce the age or increase the age of retirement, these sorts of things. Their military is really professionalized at this point. They changed after, of course, the military dictatorship. It is very highly professional. It is very well funded and professionalized, right? So it's very apolitical, merit based, all these sorts of things. Um, their most recent administrations for like, man, 30 years or something, 20 years, have been pretty much leftist, successive leftist governments. Like, not far left, but, left of center for sure. But they've also been highly successful. So this is, very different from like, Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela. This leftist government has done really well and has been reelected, over and over because they've done well. Um, they've been very good at attracting foreign investment. They have a very, stable economy with good growth. They have really high rule of law and a good court system, so that always helps with investment. They have a pretty diverse economy at this point. They have really good tourism. They have lots of like rainforest. They have good services industries. They're doing pretty well. They introduced universal healthcare in 2007. They still have middling performing schools. It is a problem. They have like universal education, but the education isn't great, right? And they also have high debt problems. So in the future, we'll see if that comes to bite them. Um, they've been really highly progressive for a Latin American state. They legalized state owned and grown and sold marijuana. So the state basically makes the profit and the taxation off of all marijuana sales in Uruguay. They were one of the only, one of the few Latin American states to decriminalize abortion. and they allow abortion in the first trimester, the first 12 weeks. And they also allow same sex marriage. Um, let's see, globalization. We should mention Mercosur. Mercosur is sort of a trade association, a trade agreement that includes a lot of South American and Latin American countries. It was signed in 1991 and really helped them export a lot of commodities. They also learned their lesson, right, in in the 70s and 80s on oil. They're like, well, our economy is collapsing because we're having to import all this oil. So they are one of, if not the only, like 99% renewable energy country on Earth. They have invested very heavily in green technology, in green research, in solar, all this kind of stuff. So about 99% of their energy is renewable. It's pretty incredible. That's actually where I would like to retire to. So I'm looking at buying land in Uruguay. It's a gorgeous place, and it's like the safest place in South America. So, all right. I'll see you for the next one, which will be Bolivia. Have a great day.